Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us here today. We're about to get started. All right. Welcome to Fundamentals for Startups, a CoMotion Labs production. My name is Dilip Sivam, and I'm the entrepreneur in residence at the Washington Clean Energy Test Beds, which is part of the University of Washington Clean Energy Institute. So if anyone is interested in learning about clean energy or clean tech, just come grab me afterwards. If you've joined us before, you know that CoMotion is a multidisciplinary incubator hosting early stage startups from both inside and outside of the UW community. CoMotion is committed to nurturing and enabling the success of our startups through opportunities for learning, mentorship, and networking. And CoMotion does all of this without taking any equity or IP position in its startups. So CoMotion has 3 incubators and 2 locations on campus. Life sciences and hardware is in Fluke Hall, and tech is right here in Startup Hall. And so if you're a founder looking for a community to help your startup grow and flourish, CoMotion would love to talk to you. So this event series is called Fundamentals for Startups, and it's a weekly lecture series open to anyone who's interested in learning about startups or entrepreneurship. Every week we bring in experts from around the community with diverse experiences and perspectives to answer questions, inspire actions, and share their perspectives with you. So a few announcements before we get started. All of the Fundamentals for Startups presentations are archived on YouTube and on the CoMotion website, where you can search and filter by topic. And to learn more and register about future Fundamentals events, visit CoMotion Labs online to learn more. All right. Today, I'm excited to introduce Lisa Norton, CoMotion's Director of Licensing, Physical Sciences, and Engineering. She's a scientist, biotech entrepreneur, and 20-year CoMotion veteran supporting UW innovators working with medical devices and helping teams translate their ideas from the lab to the marketplace. Today, Lisa will talk about the art of translating science, or how to communicate complex topics to lay people, like investors or potential partners. All right, thank you, Lisa. Take it away.
Thanks. Fantastic. Thank you, Dilip. I'm really excited to be talking to you all today, whether you're here with us in the room or online, about the art of translating science. And it really is translation. Just like if you're in a place where you might not be familiar with the language, or you're talking to somebody else who's not familiar with yours, having a way to have that initial point of connection, initial point of communication can feel great. Maybe that's just getting you to your train, helping to get somebody to a point of interest. But what we're talking about today is how you're going to be doing that with your research. And that point of connection, it might be around your technology itself. It could be about the problem or the idea that inspired it, and it can be utilized in so many different ways. So I like this quote, sort of, maybe. So it's both maybe Albert Einstein and maybe true. If you can explain it to a 6-year-old, certainly that means you do understand it yourself. But if you can't, it may just mean that you haven't thought about your technology in that way and trying to find those simplified terms, or you just need to find better words to describe what you already know. So as Dilip mentioned, I'm an engineer and a scientist by training. Through all my classes in undergrad and grad, the one class that I use every day is not one of my science or engineering classes, it's a communications class. And my undergraduate university felt that it was really key to make sure that their scientists and engineers could be understood when they're talking about their technology to non-technologists. And that can happen, maybe that's a social setting, maybe that's in an interview process, maybe you're trying to get a particular resource, or it's that you want to get some funding, you want to talk to a collaborator, and you need to do so in a way that somebody who's not in your field can quickly understand. And so what they really wanted us to do was to have better ways to, talk about our technology and do it in a manner that was pretty concise and clear. And those are the tools that I'm really hoping that I'm going to be able to pass on to you today. Also, with that thought of there are times where you're going to be in a corporation or in an organization, and you may be training people who are in positions junior to yours, or you may be talking to senior executives, having that ability to manage up and down is actually such a big topic that that's the topic of next week's talk that I hope you'll join us for with Victoria Hunt. So today we're going to talk about tools and tips for what to say, who to say it to, and how to say it. So what to say? We're going to go through how you can remove jargon, how you can really pare down your message to make it quick and concise and hopefully interesting, how to create a pitch sentence, which you can also think of as just a compelling sentence, and then practicing and testing your pitch, which is really crucial, I think. The first one, removing jargon. This is a favorite story of mine from a friend of mine who's in a Fortune 100 company. She was talking about all the challenges that her organization was having around communication, and the CEO got everybody together and said, we need to stop using TLAs, they're a barrier to communication. And everybody immediately agreed because half the people in the room didn't know what a TLA was, or at least not in this context. And what he was trying to convey is that they were using too many three-letter acronyms, not in fact the last airbender. But as you can see, like, people then got focused on trying to figure out what the jargon meant, and so his message wasn't as effective because they were trying to understand the first part and really never made it to the second. The more that you can do to take out jargon, the better. And just like this CEO, who probably just glossed over it because it was something that they were so familiar with, we tend to be the same way. So find somebody who's not in your field and practice your talk with them. That can be a great way to help identify those points. And for me, my sister happens to be in a completely different field. She works in public policy and public transportation, which I'll let you know is full of three-letter acronyms. And so when the two of us are giving our talks to one another, we're pretty good at immediately identifying that jargon where it's something that either I or she would think that everybody would immediately understand. So do that as a favor to your audience so they're not distracted from the message that you actually want them to hear. Next, paring down your message. I know this can be tough too because if you're passionate about your work, then maybe everything's interesting or exciting or meaningful or important and understood, but to get to those talks where you want to talk about everything, you have to find a good place to start. And that's really what paring down your message means. So think about it from maybe a different perspective in not just what is your data, but what does that data mean? Who does it mean something to? Is there a problem that you're uniquely solving? If so, how do you focus on that? And then what's the impact of your idea, of your thinking about a problem, or the technology that you have? So really think about your work in terms of maybe what's most novel and what would be most impactful to an audience. And please don't do it in a really complex chart or graph that has, 3 different axes, because generally that's not the best way to start a conversation. Again, you might get there, but to get there you have to start somewhere. I'm going to talk about, unfortunately, a 3-letter acronym, but a minimum viable product, and that's a product with enough features to attract early adopter customers and validate a product idea. So if you're creating a product from your research project, you want to create something, whether that's a beta version of your code, whether that's the next version of your prototype, maybe beyond making a 3D print of it, that's going to enable somebody to understand enough about your technology that they can give you feedback. And in a similar way, what I want you all to be able to do after you leave today is to create a pitch sentence or a compelling sentence that serves somewhat of a similar purpose. It's that seed, that beginning of an idea, something that you can get feedback on, that's kind of testable with your audience, and really an immediately accessible description that provides enough information to garner interest and get that feedback. I'm going to go through a few examples of different pitch sentences. If any of you are familiar with Mad Libs, that's kind of what this is. You have a template with components to fill in, and here, this first template is for customers, or maybe their patients or users that have a particular problem. We've developed some solution that produces some kind of benefit. And to show you what that would look like, I chose something that I hope a number of people in the room are familiar with. and that's WhatsApp. And so I created this sentence to describe that technology. So here, for all smartphone users that want to share text, photos, audio and video messages with their friends around the world, we've developed WhatsApp, a free cross-platform messaging service. So that's who the user is, what they're looking for, how we can deliver it if we were in fact WhatsApp. And in creating this for this talk, I would highly recommend, as you take some homework today, if you want to take some homework today, is try doing this not with your technology at first. Do it with something that you're familiar with, whether that's your favorite app, whether it's your favorite technical product, whether it's just something that's on your desk, in your bag, wherever, because just in trying to fill out the sentence, it's going to make you think about that item differently. And then I think it's going to be that much easier when you want to try to do that with your technology. It'll just be a way to create that next step in having that definition. So another example sentence is, we're developing a particular solution to help an audience resolve a problem using our novelty or our secret sauce. So here, it's a little bit different from the prior sentence in that we're putting more focus on what that novelty is. And I'm going to use an actual example. This is from a UW startup called PVP Biologics, which is now a part of Takeda. And this isn't necessarily their sentence. This is just what I created. So we're developing a treatment to help people with celiac disease safely eat gluten using a proprietary enzyme to break gluten down in the stomach. This is fantastic. There are a number of people with celiac disease. There are also a number of people with gluten sensitivity. So great that there would be this possible solution for those people, and it specifies that that solution from this company is their proprietary enzyme. Another way to create a pitch sentence is using a statistic. So hopefully it's an amazing statistic. This again is an actual example. This was from a researcher, Jim Park, and with one of the mentors who happens to be in the room today. He and I had a number of conversations with Jim. This was not the first thing that jumped out of those conversations. So it was a lot of asking the right questions, talking about the impact, talking about what was going to be different. And that's how we came up with this sentence that our technology can detect liver cancer tumors with less than 50,000 cells. This is a more than 1,000-fold increase over existing imaging. So that's really an amazing statistic, especially if you unfortunately happen to be a liver cancer patient. That means that your tumor could be detected at a much earlier stage so that it then can be treated earlier, and we're really hoping that this technology is going to greatly improve outcomes for all of those patients. And when Jim started presenting his technology in this way, he got a lot more traction with a lot broader groups, which is exactly what the point was. And similarly, if I wanted to talk about the previous technology in this way, 30% of Americans are either celiac, gluten sensitive, or choose to eat a gluten-free diet. So again, like, that's a big group of the US. That was really surprising to me when I saw that statistic. So if you have an amazing statistic, and it's a good way to be able to get a very quick introduction to the impact of your product or your project or your idea or the problem, use that for sure. And then this one can be a great way if it works, but it can be a little tricky. So this is creating a sentence that uses a comparison. And the thing that's absolutely required here is that somebody understands what it is that you're comparing it to. And if they don't, be ready, have some other second way to describe it in the wings in case you just get kind of a blank look when you're trying to utilize this. So here, the template is, our product is like some hopefully well-known existing technology, but for a different application or customer. And these are some real-world examples. The first one is, Swimply is like Airbnb for pools. So if you're familiar with the idea of Airbnb, the first question you might ask, which is the first question I asked when I heard about this, is, wait, so people that have their own pools just rent them out? And the answer apparently is, yeah, for the day or a few hours. That's a way that if you're looking to rent a pool, you could do it. And another one is, Dolly is like Uber, but for moving. And when I first heard that, my question was, okay, so Uber uses people's own cars as taxis. Does that mean people are using their own trucks as moving trucks? And the answer for that also is yes. So being that I was familiar with those two technologies, and hopefully other people in the room were as well when they were being presented, it can just get you a little bit of a springboard into answering the more interesting questions about your technology, or just having a quick way for it to be understood. I'm going to talk about two more examples. These, again, are actual UW technologies, and the thing that I really want to emphasize on this slide is there is nothing wrong with the sentences in blue on the left. Those are great sentences, they're great descriptions. That might just be the second, third, fifth way that you're going to get into your technology. But if you want to have it be broadly accessible to a wider range of people at the beginning, we helped both of these teams through our Idea to Plan workshop craft a quick pitch so that hopefully anybody, whether that was just in some social meeting, you're talking to somebody on the light rail, or you want to use this because you're writing a project development grant that's really focused on that future development, or you're trying to have an initial conversation with a funder or investor. This can just be a quick pitch to have somebody be interested in your idea. So with the first description, X is an online database that connects cancer patients and cancer specialists and uses data sharing to expedite therapy. Again, that can be a great sentence, and if your audience is in your field, you could potentially start there. But if they're not, and you need them to get there, or you'd like them to get there, you can start with a pitch of share your data, cure cancer. And that, for this team, has been a really effective way to have more interesting discussions. In the same way, Y is a lightweight exoskeleton for kids with spinal injuries that enables them to walk more independently. And for that team, we came up with a quick pitch of, it's like Iron Man legs for kids. So if you're a fan of Marvel, or you know who Iron Man is, you can kind of get this idea that it's going to enhance somebody's capabilities. And that's exactly right. If you're not, and somebody, again, might be giving you a blank stare, then you just have to think of another way to explain this, and maybe you would use a lot of the information from that same sentence in the blue side, but potentially define exoskeleton, or some other way to make sure that people are going to be able to understand your idea. So I've given you a couple of examples of how to create that compelling sentence or that pitch sentence. Once you have it, practice, pitch it, talk about it with other people. You're really using a lot of the same technologies that you may already have learned in the lab in terms of your testing it. Your sentence is kind of your hypothesis, with the hypothesis being, I've created a message that's going to have immediate impact. And if you haven't, keep reworking it. But really test your sentence, your presentation out, be open to feedback. A lot of appreciation to Dilip and my colleague Adam for going through this presentation with me with great comments. The more that you can do that, people are going to point out interesting things. So really do be open to it. I'm again going to mention, talk about your presentation or your technology with people who are outside your field. They're just going to give you different feedback than you might have from somebody who already is really familiar with it. And then, and this one can be tough, don't get too attached to a description that's not working. So if you really feel like you have the perfect way to describe something, or it's exactly like this thing in that obscure book that's your favorite, that may be true. But if it's not immediately understood, if it's not getting you to the kind of questions that you want to have or the kind of conversations that you want to have, then think about how to rework that. There is a longer pitch called an elevator pitch. Those are usually 30 seconds to a minute, with the idea being that somehow you end up on an elevator with somebody that you want to persuade that your technology is interesting, or you need a resource for them, or whatever it may be, but you have this limited amount of time to do it. You only have the time of the elevator ride. And here in Seattle, there's a pitch competition that happens in Smith Tower, because that elevator ride from the bottom to the top is almost exactly a minute. And if you want to see somebody give a great elevator pitch, go ahead and watch that competition and watch for Greg Newbloom. He is a UW entrepreneur who started his own business, and that video starts at about 7 minutes. And the reason to do that is the more that you can watch people who do this well, the more you can understand how that might relate to your own technology. You might find something really compelling, or that was an interesting way that they said that, and just use all of those as tools to hone your particular message. This always surprises people, but I'm an introvert. I had to do a lot of public speaking, starting in grad school, presenting my technology to outside companies and at conferences, and really had to get comfortable with doing that, and so just practiced a lot. If you're not comfortable with public speaking and you'd like to be, there's also a group called Toastmasters. They have something like 50 to 70 groups just in the Seattle area who will work with you on how to do pitching. So just know that there are plenty of resources if this is something that you want to do. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about what to say, and now we're going to talk about who to say it to. And here, I'm making the assumption that you've already made that connection. But if networking, if making those connections are something that you would love to have some additional tools for, we have another talk in 3 weeks, a panel that Dilip is on with 2 other great colleagues, and they're going to talk exactly about that, about how to best network. But here again, I'm assuming that you've already made that connection and you're just trying to figure out how it is that you'd like to present your information. So one of the ways to think about that is to think about what the intent is. Are you talking about something because you want to create that contact, you want to deepen that contact, maybe it's an interview, it's for an educational purpose, you're looking for a resource, maybe that's funding or a collaboration, maybe you want to talk more about how to develop your product, but in whatever way you want to talk about, think about how you may change or edit your message. Maybe there are different things that you'd emphasize depending on which of these it would fall under. Then know your audience. This is really important. Know what they'd most like to hear. Is that details? Do they want to hear an overview? Are they most interested in the impact? So again, from my grad school time when I was doing presentations, there was a course of over 2 days. I was presenting both at a really niche technical conference and to companies who were potentially interested in licensing my technology. And I had a slide deck that I could use a number of the same slides from for both of those audiences, but they fairly quickly diverged. The really deep science conference was much more interested in those like graphs and gels that really weren't going to be of interest to companies, and the things that I was pointing out for companies where I was getting maybe deep into competitors or market or how quickly we would be able to get to a product weren't necessarily of interest to the first audience. So just really think about that as you're deciding what you want to present and who you want to present it to. And then if you can, understand how that audience likes to receive information. Is this somebody who posts a lot on a particular social media channel? If so, maybe that's a great way to connect with them. Or do they indicate? If you ask them, how do you like to be connected? Do they say, like, I'd love to get together for a coffee, let's hop on a quick call or Zoom, or if you text me, that's great, or I read my emails, whatever it is. And if you can't figure it out from that person directly, use your network, ask if somebody else you know has already had a connection with that person and find out a little bit about it there. And in our panel 2 weeks from now, we've got a great investor panel, and they're going to talk in more detail about how to communicate with investors in particular and give some information about how they like to be contacted. So join us for that if you can. So once you know your audience, it's really important to keep your audience. Really do your best to be engaging. Watch the room or watch the person that you're talking to. If they're really into whatever's on their phone screen or they're looking around, try to either figure out how you could change your message or ask them a question to get them engaged or re-engaged. To have that messaging be most effective, it's usually best to keep any initial contact short, having it be interesting and personalized. That doesn't necessarily mean it's personalized to like one individual. That might be saying that your technology fits with a company's pipeline, or that you've seen that this grantor funds a lot of grants in this particular area. So that kind of personalization. Be confident in your messaging. The more that you practice and the more that you're confident, the less people are going to be distracted by what you may be doing, and the more hopefully that they're going to hear what you're saying, what you want to present. And Also, is your audience asking questions? Apologies that you guys haven't gotten to do that yet. You will in a few minutes. But if you're having a conversation, you don't want it to be a lecture or a soliloquy, at least not for this intent. So make sure that you're creating space, giving an opportunity for those questions to be asked. Okay, so now we've talked about what you want to say, who you want to say it to, and then this can be key for when you want to say it. I get a lot of questions from my teams feeling like they're too early, but they want to make a connection, and maybe they want to write a grant, and what they want to do is going to be 10 months out, but if they write the grant now, then they'll have that already waiting when they really are ready to do that research, or maybe they really want to talk to funders, but they feel as though they're not quite there yet, and they just really like some feedback. That's fine. If you have a discussion that you want to have that's early, just make sure that the other side knows that it's early and knows that you know that as well. And also make sure that they understand what you're hoping to get from that conversation so that they know how they could be helpful. For conversations that are a bit later, and especially if it's something that has a particular due date, like a grant application, like a funding cycle, do your best to give the other side enough time to fully consider your technology so that they can give the best feedback. And I know that that can be really difficult, especially if you're hoping that that last experiment that you're running that's going to be done at 8 tomorrow morning before your 9 o'clock presentation, you really want that data to be in there. That's okay. You can have like great last minute information. But if that is the case, try to at least give some bare bones, some outline of what you're interested in beforehand so that they can speak to that. And again, give yourself time to practice and get feedback. I'm going to talk only really briefly about intellectual property because that could be a whole series of talks, and in fact it is. Please go on our YouTube channel. You can find all sorts of information about it there. But the intellectual property is really typically the most novel aspects of your idea or your innovation. And they're the aspects that would generally be protected by copyright, patent, maybe it's a trademark, or even though we don't really work with them in the University of Washington, it could be a trade secret. So if you want to talk about something and you want to talk about it with someone in a way that it's going to fully describe your novelty and that hasn't been talked about yet, I'm just going to give you some ideas around that. So a public disclosure of an innovation is any public written, published, or oral communication that describes your innovation in detail. And that means that somebody else hearing your talk, seeing your video clip on your lab's website could utilize that information to replicate your work. And so the broader description of publication, because it is really broad, includes not only things that you might traditionally think of, like journal articles, but also, is that a conference proceeding? Is it your thesis or dissertation that's maybe available in the library? All these things that may have quite a bit of detail about your technology that maybe you didn't want to pass along quite yet. If you did, if it's already published and you want to talk about it, great. Then you can talk really broadly about whatever is already in the public domain. Similarly, if you really want to have a conversation, you don't want to get into those details, you can always have a really high-level conversation that's non-confidential. So for those quick pitch sentences, share your data, cure cancer, I'm not passing along how the team is going to be doing that. I'm just having that initial point of contact. And then maybe later, as we get more deeply into those conversations, we'd want to think about creating a confidentiality agreement. Sometimes before you want to give a presentation or do a talk, you may want to consider filing a patent on your technology. But this is just to remind you to consider that as you're going into particular conversations. So again, if you want to have it be non-confidential, you just want to have it be really high level at the beginning, that's great. If you have some published materials, you could talk about those really broadly because they've already been published. If there's something that you want to really keep novel, keep protected, then 2 ways to do that may be creating a confidentiality agreement or potentially filing a patent beforehand. And we have a great talk as well that's specifically on public disclosures. That's the one that's linked at the bottom of this slide here. Look for Patrick Chinkiewski's talk on our YouTube channel. Okay, I'm going to go really briefly through some resources. If you want to practice your pitch, one of the best ways to do that is to become part of a pitch competition. Right now, the Foster School is doing their pitch competition, so while it will be too late to join as a team, it is never too late to join as the audience. Go listen to people pitch. They typically do that elevator pitch, that 1-minute pitch, and just in hearing how somebody else presents their technology, again, it will typically give you good ideas of what you find to be interesting, compelling, effective, and so then really do your best to incorporate that into your talk. You can also check out our YouTube channel. I know I've mentioned it a number of times, but it has some really great talks on how to do a pitch as well. I think there are 6 or 7 of them. There are also great examples on the web. If you want to have a way to learn how to do customer discovery and get some more tools on how to speak about your technology from more of a business perspective, you can join the NSF I-Core program through our office. That's a program through the National Science Foundation that's across the US that helps teams do just that. Learn a little bit more about how they want to talk about their technology and how to do customer discovery. If you're already working with our office and you'd like to do a deeper dive into effective communication, we have something called our Idea to Plan workshop, where teams that are working with us get paired with a mentor, and that team works together over the course of an 8-hour day to really craft a business plan, the beginnings of a business plan, and that's where a lot of these messages came from, was actually that workshop. So it can just be another great way if that's where you're planning to go with your data. Another great resource, so I often get asked questions along the lines of, my technology is just so complex, I'm not sure how I could break it down. I understand why that would be important, but I don't know how to do it. And for that, I recommend a book series from Chris Ferry. You may have seen these around. There's a whole set, I think it's about 30 books, including one called Quantum Physics for Babies. So these are for really little kids, breaking down highly technical concepts, and it can, again, be just another tool of seeing how somebody else is taking something that's really complex and simplifying it. And about those books, there's this great quote that I just wanted to pass along. So this is from the Society for Computers and Law. And the quote is, "With its one-sentence pages and brightly colored diagrams, it is suitable for even the most senior executives." And I just love that. And it's not a slam on senior executives. Those senior executives may absolutely be expert in their field of finance or investing or whatever it is. They're on the manufacturing side and you're on a different side of tech or you're doing software. It doesn't mean that they don't have that level of understanding. They just don't have it in your field. And so whatever you can do to break down those barriers of good conversation, to have a better conversation by changing the way that you'd message something, I think the better conversations that you're going to have, and also just the more opportunities it's going to create for you. So overall, be clear, be concise and confident. Practice as often as you need to be comfortable with what you're saying and how you're saying it. Know that getting asked what you do happens often. That can be a great way to practice some of these messages. When you get feedback, really think about it. Are you getting exactly the feedback you want? Like, this is so cool. I always get, the first question is exactly the first question I want to answer. Then you may not need to change anything. But if the first question that you get clearly shows that people aren't understanding what you're saying, or they're maybe taking something away that wasn't your intent, then just consider how you would adapt your message so that you could have that better conversation. Also, one of the things, and this is definitely like next level, but if you can handle it, videotape yourself while you're presenting. That was something we had to do in that communications class, and it'll tell you if you're holding onto the podium like it's a life raft, or if you start every sentence with or if you sway back and forth the whole time. And while there's really nothing terrible about that, again, it could just be something that's going to distract from the actual message that you want to convey. And overall, have fun. I think one of the most exciting things, and it's definitely a lot of why I do what I do, is I love having that moment in talking to a team or in working with a team to talk to people outside, and you can see immediately when you understand one another over this complex idea, or you find that place of impact, or you just find some great way to message that has that other side get at least a little bit of the excitement and passion that you do about your technology. Thank you all. be happy to take any questions.
Oh, I'm a visual learner, so I'm kind of
Yeah.
curious, like a lot of this is about language.
Yeah.
Do you also use like infographics or other visual aids to
Yeah.
get people to understand?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So we do, for one of our grant programs, we suggest that people have we've done this in the past, that if the best way is going to be to have a one-page depiction of your technology, then do that. So sometimes it's just maybe an image of your actual device. Other times it's how it would be utilized or part of the pathway that it becomes integral to if you've got some customer pathway. A lot of these concepts are the same. If you're presenting that visually, really try not to use jargon, really try not to have it initially be incredibly complex, have it be as immediately accessible as possible, but absolutely you can do things visually. Thanks, that's a great question. Up front?
My question is about like how to organize your materials when you start to get like sets of it for different audiences.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm just kind of using file folders, and I've got PowerPoints and PDFs and short videos and links to YouTube. I had wondered has anyone figured out ways to, like you mentioned audience, which is huge,
Mm-hmm.
and you're trying to get kind of different information from different people. Sometimes you're trying to give information, sometimes you're trying to take information
Absolutely.
or establish relationship. What are people doing to try to organize? I've looked at journey.io, I don't know if you've ever heard of that, so that I can, like basically a lot of times you're creating these materials before you need them, and then you keep coming back and you're building this huge thing.
Mm-hmm.
How do you organize that?
So I can tell you how I organize it. I'm sure it's not the best way to organize it, but I do have different sets of PowerPoint folders. Sometimes those are also then related to documents, but I have probably 3 slides that I would use in almost any presentation that I give. And so I keep that in like one folder of like stock images. And then for presentations that I make, they have sort of a tagline of who the audience is. And that can just make it easier to pull it up. Am I doing this for a particular class? Am I doing it in a particular technology sector, or is it a general talk? And then if it's a general talk, is it a general like 10-minute talk, or is it a general hour-long talk? I don't propose that that's most the efficient way to do it, but it works for me. Yeah, good question. If anybody else knows of effective ways to do that, make sure to pair up with this guy.
For early stage startups, so one of the suggestions I see is market opportunity put in there. And sometimes it becomes very challenging to even come up with those numbers. So how much do you think it really influences the funders if we don't have right numbers, right description in that part of the slide deck?
Yeah, so the question was about market opportunity. How do you do that? How much of the message should it be? How important is it? So I'm going to try to answer all those different parts. So market opportunity, if you have the ability to use the university and use the business library, do. The business librarians have a page where you can ask for an hour of their time. They are amazing. It is a fantastic way to get access to market documents that you may not already have. If your technology is in a crowded space, or if it's in sort of an orphan space, being able to prove your market can be more important in those cases, where you're trying to say, yeah, I understand that there are a number of technologies that are out there, but mine is critical because of this, or mine is going to immediately address this group of people. In talking to investors, the thing that is much more persuasive if you have it, or if you can get it, and you should, is customer information. So having numbers on a slide is great. If you can actually talk to people, though, about whether they would use your technology, whether they would buy your technology, how quickly they would do so, that is incredibly persuasive. And for that like percent of our teams that are actually able to deploy that minimum viable product early so that they have direct user feedback, not only on the concept, but on the product itself, that often is going to speak as loudly or more loudly as any marketing materials. Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you for everything.
Sure.
What are some like best practices that maybe you could think of on when you have IP associated and you're trying to do due diligence? I think similar to the last question, but I think when it comes to like some resources or anything that you might have dealt with in terms of building out IP. Thank you.
Sure. So let me clarify. In that instance, it's to make it easier for the people who are doing the due diligence, or you're doing the due diligence. Yeah, that's a great question that I honestly don't have a great answer for. But in my experience, which is limited with people doing due diligence, whether it's on my technology or one of my teams, the best way to do that is take the materials that they have, then ask who they're familiar with in the field as well, or if they've talked to other competitors, can be also a good way to understand, because if somebody's product is the same, there also likely is intellectual property that's going to be the same. If you really want to do a deep dive, a way to do that is the patent information in what had been called PAIR, but is now part of the U.S. Patent Office database, gives the information about what other technologies that patent examiner for that particular technology found to be the most relevant. And you can see all the responses from the team when the patent examiner is saying, we can't give you a patent on that because it's too similar to these technologies. You can also see the responses back from the team itself saying, no, it's not, and this is why. That can be a great way to get into that diligence of, okay, these are things that the patent office thought were substantially similar. There are also other programs that you can utilize to search if you're looking for it, not just from an IP perspective, but also from a product perspective or a market perspective. And I'm unfortunately not the best resource for that, but if I can find one, I'll certainly send it to you. And we definitely have, I think, other people in the room that may be able to answer that question better than I can. Yeah, great question, Goat. Thanks.
Do you ever basically segment your different audiences as you're trying to just kind of like, in my case, we're doing language algorithms for e-commerce. So I've got like shoppers and then brands or B2B2C. So we've got kind of brands and then the shoppers that those brands serve. And then we've got tech people we're trying to attract, and then designers and UX researchers and then investors. And so you're kind of like start to get all of these things happening in parallel. Mm-hmm. And you sort of have different objectives from different conversations, and I was wondering how you, do you do anything like proactively before you have these conversations to think about what you're trying to get from them, and then kind of reflect on like what your information you're giving to them to try to, because like in the end you can almost think of these as roles, not even individual people, right? Like I don't actually care which investor or which tech person I get as long as they kind of meet the requirement, and so then you start generalizing, within certain segments.
Yeah.
How do you like define and kind of track these conversations and then, figure out what's working for each of these different ones?
Yeah, great question again. So when you're doing customer discovery or customer analysis, there are a number of great tools out there, some that we've used with the teams that are really proceeding forward with their technologies. There's some that you even get introduced to through the I-Core program. But really what it is if you create your series of questions that you want to ask a particular audience, and you may have multiple of those because you've got multiple different audiences, and then you keep those notes, you keep that feedback, and you can do that in a way that it's searchable and sortable, so everybody keeps asking, what the cost of the product is, or are oncologists really going to use it, or do you know about this software program that I think is similar? And so the notes that you take and having it be in a searchable format is also going to help you highlight those things that are consistent. And it may be things that are consistent in a good way, but if it's consistent in a way that you realize, oh, I need to have a better or a different answer to that question, or that's something that we haven't thought about yet, that clearly the people that we're talking to that are in this segment want to know, that can be really informative. So I'm in the medical device space. I have a lot of teams that are primarily in that space. And so when they're doing customer feedback, they're talking to users that may be the patient, that may be the clinician, It may be actually the insurance company that's going to do the reimbursement. And so those are three typically very different sets of questions. We're looking for different answers from them. And to do that, it can really help to have a way that sets up your notes. So yes, there are going to be those different questions. Keep them in some way that's searchable so you can see what the consistencies are through a word search. Will be one of my suggestions for that. And there are definitely both free and not so free programs that can do that on your behalf. Yeah, Zach?
What what situation would you say the most successful pitches tend to be happening in? So, I mean, you can like come across pitches anywhere, you know, you're in the elevator and you're giving it, but like that's usually probably not actually yielding like a next conversation. Mm-hmm. Where do you think the most successful pitches tend to be happening?
It's a really good question because it also depends on how you define success. So is success just like having made that connection or having the next conversation, or is it actually getting a resource that you're hoping to get?
Actually getting a resource and like connecting to an investor.
Yeah. So I think some of the ones where you sort of get like the most return on your investment of time and practice are at things like pitch competitions, and that's whether you're pitching or whether you're in the audience, whether you're just in the room and you realize, okay, this investor keeps asking really good questions that are in a technical area that is similar to mine. I'm going to make a point of going to talk to that person. And often in that room, it's not Shark Tank, right? Or rarely is Shark Tank. Somebody's typically not going to hand you a check in the room. They're going to do their due diligence, like from the last question. They're going to have more questions, but often that success is that you've made enough of a connection, you've had somebody understand enough of your message that that's going to lead to the next conversation. Actual funding could be, depending on the stage of your technology and the stage that they invest in, that could be a couple months away, it could be a year away, but I think you kind of want to do it in a target-rich environment. And so that can be a great place to do it. It's just a great place to meet people in that way.
Do those pitch competitions usually have like a list of the investors that will be there?
It depends on the competition. Sometimes yes, but I don't know how often they're publicly available. So I understand that would be great. I'm also guessing that on the investor side, you know, it can, yeah, they may want it to be quieter, but it also can just vary. If they don't know how their day is going to go, you know, maybe they're a little bit more of a tentative commitment. So sometimes it's just helpful if you know that somebody's having a pitch competition that's in your area, technical area. So right now, the ones that are happening through the Foster School, there's the Holloman Health Innovation Challenge coming up. There's one on clean tech coming up. Then there's one that's really general. So if you have a technology that's in the healthcare space or in the clean tech space, those are the ones that you might want to attend just to know who else is in the room. So that's somebody that I should talk to. That's somebody who's doing something similar. Maybe we'd be able to get some good information from one another. Those are generally the places that I've found that are great for meeting people and getting to that next phase. Yeah, thank you.
We have one last question. This one's online. It says, if you don't know whether your audience has expertise, how should you go about introducing your pitch and delivering deeper information?
Yeah, great. So you can start by saying, are you familiar with whatever? And they can either say yes or no. You can start from there, or you can start with your sentence, and if it's clear that you know they're nodding or they're understanding, then you can ask that next question. There's nothing wrong with asking about somebody's familiarity with an area. People will typically be happy to, you know, oh, I know a little bit about that, or I know the idea, but could you tell me more? So yes, don't feel as though you just have to jump in without getting some initial feedback around your audience's technical knowledge.
We have another question. It says, you mentioned an elevator pitch. What does the talk format look like?
Yeah, well, there we go. So, wow, thanks, canned question. Yeah, for elevator pitch templates, this is not unique. You can find these online, but this is a general idea of how you would set up your your pitch what sort of things you'd want to answer. So thanks for that question. But this just gives you some additional ways to do that and additional ideas to think about as you create an expansion on that initial pitch sentence or compelling sentence. And by the way, I didn't mention this before and I should have, but if you'd like a copy of these slides, I know that I have links in them. You can contact me directly. I don't know if there's a way that we would be distributing the slides otherwise, but feel free to email me at my email address here.
Just to fill in, if you did leave your email at the sign-in, I will go ahead and email you a copy.
Thanks, Jamie. Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Lisa, for that fantastic talk on a really important topic. I really loved some of your specific tips and tricks that you gave us. And just as a reminder to everyone, same time, same place, next week at noon, we will be having Victoria Hunt, the Chief Data Officer from Crosswalks Labs, giving a talk entitled Managing Up and Managing Down for More Effective Teams. I can put in a personal plug for this one. I've been friends with Vicki for many years, and we worked together for many years, and I can attest that she's a fantastic communicator and fantastic organizational operator. So I'm sure she's going to have a lot of tips that are going to be really useful for you all. So please join next week. All right, thank you.